Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for April 19th, 2018. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Strada, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Okay, we just have a news-packed show today. We have some fun stuff lined up tomorrow and next week, but let's just get into it. Let's start off with Amazon landing a sci-fi series from the creators of Westworld. As a fan of Westworld, this has me excited. Ben, tell us about it.
Yes, so Westworld showrunners Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, who are married in real life, have sold a new show to Amazon. It's based on William Gibson's 2014 novel called The Peripheral. And William Gibson is a guy who wrote Neuromancer, and he is a very acclaimed sci-fi author. So this is an established property from a big name in the sci-fi world. And obviously Nolan and Joy are pretty big deals in the sci-fi world right now with Westworld. The synopsis of the novel is a little bit complicated, but I guess just to boil it down, it's about this woman who lives, I think, in the very near future in a sort of rural American town where she essentially uses virtual reality to step in to play this virtual prototype of a world that looks a lot like London, but things are slightly off. And she is like taking over shifts in this virtual world for her brother, who is an army vet. And she's promised that this game is not like a traditional first-person shooter kind of thing, but she witnesses this crime there, and there's a time travel component to it. I mean, really, you should just go and check out the full synopsis of this thing in the article that we wrote at slashfilm.com. But this is an exciting piece of news because obviously Nolan and Joy are big deals in sci-fi, but Vincenzo Natali, the director of Cube and Splice, who's actually already directed a couple episodes of Westworld, is going to be directing this pilot and executive producing the show alongside Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. So this is going to be for Amazon. We don't really know anything about the budget yet, but it sounds pretty ambitious and sort of a similarly thematically deep and rich world that they can dive into right alongside Westworld.
Well, I'm wondering how involved they're going to be, because it feels like Westworld is like, it takes a year and a half to create one season of that show, and they're like so deeply involved in that. I know William Gibson, I haven't read a lot of his novels, but he's almost, as much as he's a sci-fi writer, he's almost like a futurist. He kind of predicts like these things about where technology is going and interesting trends in his work. It'll be interesting to see what I haven't read this book, so it'd be interesting to see where this goes. I'm excited for it. Yesterday on the podcast, we did the summer movie wager where we tried to predict the top 10 movies of summer 2018. We all predicted that Avengers Infinity War would land in at number 1 of the summer, and it looks like we might be right, because the early box office is tracking that will be the biggest box office opening of all time. Chris, what do we know?
So like you just said, the Avengers Infinity War tracking suggests this might end up being the biggest opening weekend of all time. The previous record holders were Star Wars The Force Awakens, but it looks like the lead up to this is already exceeding what The Force Awakens had. Like the buzz, all this, it just seems like.
And Force Awakens did almost like 250 million.
Around there. So this, like you said, we all anticipated this was going to be big, but it looks like it's going to be even bigger than we could have possibly imagined. I mean, this is huge. This is a huge deal for Marvel, and I guess it makes sense because they've been building to this for a long time. This feels like a culmination of everything they've done up until now. So it looks like all that work paid off.
We've been wondering, can Infinity War break, the box office that Black Panther did, which is the highest Marvel film thus far, right? With 200, if it can break 250 million opening weekend, usually the superhero films are a little top heavy, but usually the equation is like 2.5 to 3 times the opening weekend is what a movie makes domestically. So let's say 250,000 I mean, 250 million times 2.5, that's 625. So that's just short of topping Black Panther. Do you guys, Ben, sorry. Do you think that this, knowing this, do you think this will have the potential to beat Black Panther?
Yeah, I mean, hearing this makes me a lot more confident that it has a strong chance. And the thing that's craziest about this whole thing to me is that, Chris keeps talking about the culmination, and that's exactly how Marvel has been marketing this thing, as the culmination of the MCU thus far. But Avengers 4 is really going to be the culmination, because it's almost going to be, if Infinity War ends the way we think it's going to end, with our heroes sort of down and out, and it's almost like a cliffhanger kind of vibe, then that everybody who goes to see Infinity War is also going to go see Avengers 4, and maybe even more people. So that could do even more business than this one, and this is already tracking to be the biggest ever. So Marvel has a very bright future, it looks like.
I feel like with the Summer Movie Wager, now that we're bringing it onto Slash Film Daily, we're going to be talking more about box office throughout the summer and keep track of that. But you can always follow the rankings at thesummermoviewager.com. Let's move on to another film from Paramount. They are going to be making a M.A.S.K. movie from the director of Fate of the Furious, Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so this is not a remake of the Jim Carrey comedy. This is M.A.S.K. This is actually based on a toy line from the 1980s that stands for Mobile Armored Strike Command with a K, of course. And it depicts the adventures of an elite fighting force who face off against Venom, the vicious evil network of mayhem. All of this, of course, will take place in the Hasbro Cinematic Universe, and I want to kill myself for uttering that sentence, because this is a real thing that Paramount is doing. They're building the Hasbro Cinematic Universe, which also is comprised of the Transformers movies and G.I. Joe franchise. Something called Rom the Space Knight is going to be getting a movie adaptation as well. And though we don't know who is going to be writing this M.A.S.K. movie yet, F. Gary Gray, the director of the Italian Job remake and The Fate of the Furious, is going to be directing this M.A.S.K. film. So, again, we're not really sure about a timeline on this. We know that F. Gary Gray is also directing a new Men in Black movie for Sony, and that one has a July 2019 release date already, so it's almost certain that he's going to be doing that pretty soon, almost immediately. And then we'll probably jump over to this M.A.S.K. film after that. But Peter, I know you played with these M.A.S.K. toys as a kid. I certainly did not, but I was looking at the commercial. We embedded a video of a bunch of commercials in the article that you can find at slashfilm.com, and these toys are pretty ridiculous.
Oh, they're cool. They were like G.I. Joe, but it's G.I. Joe combined with Transformers. Like, these toys always had some kind of, you could transform them into different things. It was a fun toy line. It was created by Kenner, and I think it's one of those toy lines where they created a bunch of action figures, and then to market the action figures, they created a cartoon series just for the sole purpose of getting kids interested enough to buy the toys. It was like, that kind of chicken or the egg kind of thing. I never watched the TV series, the animated series, so I'm not sure if the story is there, but there definitely could be some cool cinematic things going on with the transforming, like, vehicles and weapons and stuff like that, on a level that, you don't feel attached to, like, these robots from an alien planet like Michael Bay did in the Transformers. But Chris, do you have any interest in this, or the what is it, the Hasbro Cinematic Universe?
Yes.
No.
Okay, I will remain the optimist with this one. Let's move on to another toy series. I think this toy series also spawned a cartoon series that spawned a movie and is now spawning another movie, and that is Masters of the Universe. We now have new directors that are going to take on He-Man. Chris, tell us about it.
Yes, the directors are Adam and Aaron Nee, the Nee brothers. That's
wait, who?
Yeah, so I'm very surprised by this announcement. The Nee brothers are very low budget indie directors. They really only have one prominent film to their name, and it's called Band of Robbers, and it's actually a pretty good movie. It's about it's a modern day take on Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and they're adults, and they try and pull off a robbery. And I know that doesn't sound like the most exciting film, but I watched this when it came out, and I was surprised at how charming this movie was. It was a charming, fun little indie film. Now, I don't know how that's going to translate to He-Man, but I really don't know what to say about this. It's very strange. I guess someone thought they would be right. Someone at Sony said, yes, give Masters of the Universe to these guys, and that's where we are right now. They're making the new He-Man movie.
It's got to be better than the Dolph Lundgren version, right?
I actually have a soft spot in my heart for the Dolph Lundgren movie because it's so totally just a copy of Star Wars, and from the poster to the take, it's a bad movie, but I enjoy it. But I don't know, it just seems so weird that they would hire these directors. I know they were going for big names, and then who did they have? They had David Goyer at one point attached to direct. Now they're going with the Band of Robber guys, which I'm not, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to dismiss them in any way. But, their movie got like a 77% of Rotten Tomato. That's a fresh rating, an audience score of 61%, not as good. But I'm like, watching this trailer, I don't know, like maybe they went in the room and they had a pitch that was, too hard to turn down.
It makes me think that maybe they're going for a more tongue-in-cheek take on this material, maybe, because the Band of Robbers film is a comedy, really. So maybe that's what Sony wants here. They want something that's not entirely a serious interpretation of He-Man, which makes sense because it's not a very serious property, as much as it wants to be. So maybe they're going for something maybe even satirical here. That's just a guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Up next, we're going to have a couple of reactions to trailers. So if you have not seen the trailer for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the latest trailer, or the trailer for Deadpool 2, you might want to skip ahead or turn away because, people avoid trailers nowadays and think of them as spoilers. So I don't know. If you're one of those people, I guess, Jeff Kanata, you can turn off the podcast right now. But let's move on to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. The new trailer came out yesterday, and Ben wrote up this huge trailer breakdown on the site. I will link it in the show notes, but I want to get your reactions. Ben, what is your reaction to this trailer?
So the first half of this trailer, I wasn't too crazy about it, really. I mean, it seems like a lot of stuff that we've seen before, and then it really just sort of seems flat. But then the back half is where I sort of started to get a little bit excited about this movie. And I've been very mixed on the stuff that I've seen from Fallen Kingdom thus far. But the back half of this trailer finally sort of clued me into why they hired J.A. Bayona to come on and direct this film, because he directed a movie called The Orphanage in 2007 that is like this gothic horror film, and that's really what the back half of this trailer makes Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom look like. It's completely taking the action off the island, and it goes to this huge mansion, and there's this amazing shot of a raptor jumping out of an explosion that I've become obsessed with over the past 24 hours. And it looks very much like, speaking of tongue-in-cheek, like it knows what kind of movie it is. It really sort of breaks with any sense of realism or reality at all. And then there's this really cool shot of the Indoraptor, which is like the genetically engineered new villain of the movie, on top of a house with like the moon in, covered in clouds and fog, and this thing is like roaring into the moon. It's like this really evocative, interesting shot that I don't really know how it's going to work in the grand plot of all of this, but at least the movie has some style that I can see in this trailer, and it finally gives me a sense that Bayona is going to really try to incorporate the horror elements that he's known for into at least the back half of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So I don't know. I'm still overall kind of mixed on this whole thing, but I will say I got pretty excited about a lot of the shots in the back half of this trailer.
See, it is interesting because the marketing thus far until this trailer was really playing up the disaster movie first half of this film, with them going to the island trying to rescue the dinosaurs before this extinction level event, aka volcano erupting, kills all the dinosaurs left on Earth. And, that fun action excitement was cool, but now it seems like they're getting a little spoiler-ish in showing us what happens after, they get off the island. And I'm not quite sure where they are. They're like in a little house at some point. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. These small, scenes that kind of remind me more of the sequences from Jurassic Park that I loved, like the kitchen scene with the raptors. Like, it seems like it's going to be creepy, small, tense sequences, and I love that this franchise is moving on and becoming something else. I feel like a lot of people gave the last one a lot of flack, partially that, they returned to the theme park and it was kind of the same thing again, and, some stupid mistakes, but whatever. But, I like that, I like that this seems to be taking this franchise in a totally different direction. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I really don't know what to make of this. I didn't hate Jurassic World like a lot of people did, and I was actually starting to think the sequel looked pretty good, and then this trailer really threw me for a loop because it looks so far removed from what Jurassic Park is, the original, that it's almost like baffling. Like, it seems like it's like a sequel in name only at this point. I mean, on one level, it looks really great. I mean, the visuals are incredible. There's that shot of I don't even know what the name of the dinosaur is, the water dinosaur in the wave about to eat the surfers. That's an incredible looking shot. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff in the trailer, but it's so different than what I've come to think of as the Jurassic Park franchise that I'm a little confused. At the same time,
Chris is channeling the Star Wars fanboys at this point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say at the same time, different is a good thing. I mean, in order for something to evolve, it should change. So maybe it makes sense to change things so much, but this looks like it's drastic. But I mean, I'm going to see it, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting because, seeing where they're going with this, I have no idea what the third film is going to be about. I know Colin Trevorrow, who is directing the third film, he is the producer of all three of this trilogy. He has recently been doing some press and talked about what we might expect from the third film, calling it a science thriller. Chris, what do we know about this?
Yeah, so like you said, Colin Trevorrow, he's back. He left Jurassic World 2 to basically go plan the next Star Wars film, and then obviously he's left that film, and now he's coming back. And he said in this interview both that Steven Spielberg directly asked him to come back and direct the third film, which must be nice. I wish Steven Spielberg would ask me to do something. And he said, like you said, the film is going to be a science thriller in the same way that Jurassic Park was. And so this seems like maybe this is his way of saying the third film is going to be more of a return to the original Jurassic Park. The original Jurassic Park, I feel like a lot of people forget because they mostly remember the big action set pieces. There's a lot of science stuff in that movie, and even more so in Michael Crichton's book, which is just loaded with all sorts of nerdy science stuff that I don't even understand. It's there's like pages of code and stuff.
Yeah, I remember Ben was talking about Michael Crichton a couple days ago on the podcast, and I remember diving into Jurassic Park after seeing the movie and being like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe that's what he's saying here, that the third Jurassic World is going to have a lot more science in it, but I guess we'll see.
Ben, do you have any prediction of where Jurassic World 3 could go?
Well, the trailer for Fallen Kingdom shows BD Wong's character, who is one of the scientists who I think was responsible for developing some of the tech, and he showed up in the original Jurassic Park, and he was also in Jurassic World in a small role. It seems like he might have more of a villain kind of role in this one, so maybe he'll survive the events of Fallen Kingdom, and then if all of these dinosaurs have been wiped out, maybe it'll be about him trying to genetically create these creatures again. But I don't really know from a story perspective what good that would do to completely retread things, because we're just spent all this time talking about how the series needs to evolve and change. So, I really don't know.
Okay, let's talk about the other trailer that hit recently, and that hit this morning, and that's the final trailer for Deadpool 2. I'm not a fan of this trailer. I don't know. I unlike you, Ben, I did enjoy the first one in the movie when it was in the movie theaters. It kind of gave me the sense of like, oh my god, a superhero movie doesn't just have to be X, Y, or Z. What we've seen from Fox and Disney thus far. It can be also, A or whatever, or C or whatever. But this seems like kind of more of the same, and a lot of the jokes just kind of fall flat on me. It's just like, here's a modern reference just to be a reference, and you're gonna watch this in 5 years and it's not even gonna be funny. The one thing I did laugh at in the trailer is the DCU joke. And by the way, I know we talk about spoilers from time to time, but they completely spoiled the last Wolverine film in this trailer. How many people do you think are pissed off about that?
I would imagine, and this is coming from somebody who takes spoilers probably more seriously than either of the other two people in this podcast. I would guess that everybody who wanted to see Logan has seen Logan by now. So I don't think people are going to be up in arms over that, and especially since it flies by so quickly in that title card scene.
Okay, well, Chris, what are your thoughts on this trailer?
So I've said this before, but I really do not like the first Deadpool. I know people love it, but I sat through that film just baffled as to what people are getting out of that film. But that's me. But I gotta say, I liked this trailer. What I really liked about it was that it looks like a much better directed film. Tim Miller, who directed the first film, I don't think he's a good filmmaker. He has a very point and shoot style. And I thought the style of this trailer, it actually looked really well directed. There were good action set pieces. It looked like a real movie, whereas I thought the first Deadpool kind of looked like a fan film to me. And I really liked that Rob Delaney joke at the end. Had me laughing more than literally anything that happened in the first Deadpool. So that alone is a plus for me.
So I was a little negative. You are excited for this. Ben, where do you fall?
So I for the first time I watched this, I thought this was a kind of chaotic trailer, and then I saw this clip from Avengers Infinity War that Chris wrote earlier today. Maybe we can link to that in the show notes as well. And then I had to redefine what the word chaotic actually meant in my life, because that clip is so insane. So actually rewatching the Deadpool trailer, I was like, okay, yeah, this is totally fine now. I all of my problems seem to fall away with it. I don't think it looks particularly great in terms of like the story it's telling. I feel like it reminds me of Mystery Men, the Ben Stiller superhero movie from like the late 90s, just with the way that it's structured in terms of like the introduction of these characters. But I really also loved the Rob Delaney joke at the end, and just like Chris, that made me laugh way more than anything that was in the first movie. So I don't know, guys. I mean, I just don't really like this character that much, so it's hard for me to get past that, I guess.
Let's move on to our last story, and that is about Rampage. If you have not seen Rampage, we're going to discuss the ending of Rampage, so you might want to turn off the podcast now. The story has to do with Rampage's original ending, which almost caused Dwayne Johnson to quit the project. So, again, if you have not seen Rampage, or you care about, the spoilage of Rampage's ending, leave right now. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so I'll just provide some brief setup in terms of how Rampage actually ends now to give you guys some context for how it was originally going to end. So as it exists right now, Rampage stars Dwayne Johnson as this military man who serves as a primatologist at the San Diego Zoo. He rescues an albino gorilla named George from poachers when George is a small gorilla, and then spends years, hanging out with this thing at the zoo. George is one of 3 animals who come in contact with this genetic experimentation that turn him into giant monsters, basically. And as the movie comes to an end, these creatures are like rampaging through Chicago, and George is given an antidote, and it turns into George and the Rock versus these other 2 giant creatures. So a Rolling Stone profile of Dwayne Johnson, they spoke with Johnson and some of the producers and the director, Brad Payton, about making this movie and about Johnson's role in it. And Johnson said, so the script comes in and I'm reading it, and at the end of it, George dies. I'm like, no, did I miss something? George can't be dead. But I go back and yeah. So the original film, or the original version of the script, ended with George dying. And the movie, as it exists right now, George gets impaled by this giant piece of rebar on a shattered building, and he tricks Dwayne Johnson's character into thinking that he is dead. That yes, this gigantic ape plays a prank on Dwayne Johnson. That's how this movie essentially wraps up. I mean, this happens in the last 5 minutes of the film, but yeah, it's revealed that it was a prank. He basically flicks him off and laughs at him for getting emotional about the fact that his best friend almost, was believed to be dead, and everyone has a good laugh and roll credits. So Johnson reveals that he really fought the studio in order to get this to be the movie as we know it, and to avoid the original ending of George dying. He says, I don't like a sad ending. Life brings that shit. I don't want it in my movies. When the credits roll, I want to feel great. We had a big meeting where they gave me all the reasons they thought George should die. He sacrifices himself saving the world, killing these animals who had ill intentions to harm mankind. He sacrifices himself like a brave soldier. Okay, but this is a movie. There's a crocodile the size of a football stadium. We're not making Saving Private Ryan. So I like the idea that Dwayne Johnson has a little bit of self-awareness, at least, about what kind of film he was making here. But he's also said... Oh, go ahead.
Wait, which ending would you have preferred?
So I think you got to just keep it where George dies. But and this is where Johnson comes back in. He says, my problem is I have a relationship with an audience around the world. For years, I've built a trust with them that they're going to come to my movies and feel good. So every once in a while, you're going to have to drop this card, which is you're going to have to find another actor. We need to figure something out. Otherwise, I'm not going to do the movie. So he literally threatened to walk away because this giant ape, who was his buddy in his character's buddy in the movie, was going to die. But I feel like the ending of the film as it exists right now, the fake out death, is just, I don't know, it did not land. It did not work for me in any way. I thought it was ridiculous. Peter, I know you were there at that screening as well. What did you think about the way that ending? Did it actually work for you emotionally?
Well, before the screening, Dwayne Johnson came out on stage and told us we were going to cry. So I assumed that George was going to die. So when that emotional part happened, the emotion landed, and then when it just ended up being a joke, I almost felt more of an FU to me.
Right, yeah, it completely undercuts what they're trying to do. And it's, after reading this, it strikes me as like the studio really wanted it one way. Dwayne Johnson really wanted it the other way. So they struck a compromise, but the compromise is like this weird middle ground where it doesn't work in either direction. I almost wish they would have just stuck with one or the other.
They could have killed him off and then revealed that George had a son, like back in the in San Diego, and had like the happy ending with
sequel potential.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems kind of unbelievable to me that a creature would be impaled, be drastically hurt, and in that moment decide to pull a practical joke against his best friend.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. And the movie goes to very, very great lengths to convince the audience that that George, this giant ape, is dead. He like stops breathing to such a convincing degree that a trained primatologist believes that he's dead. Like this is something that no gorilla should be able to do. And I realize I'm talking about a movie in which he grows to be like 50 feet tall or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
But this is the equivalent of, we were walking at Sundance and I tripped and fell and shattered my wrist, and my wrist blew up to like a funny, huge thing.
Grapefruit size.
Yeah. Like if at that point I started acting like I was dead, there's no, well, I know this is like a weird, comparison, but in that moment, you can't think about anything else but my wrist hurts. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I would have in my mind the idea of pulling a practical joke during a moment where I am being hurt.
I mean, George is just that funny, Peter.
And that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. Ben, where can people find more of your work online?
You can find me writing every day at slashfilm.com. You can track me down on Twitter at Ben Pears.
Chris, where can we find you?
I'm also at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at CEvangelista413.
You can find more about all the stories mentioned on today's podcast on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and television. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to peter@slashfilm.com and leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention it on the air. Please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. See you tomorrow.